Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Sustainability and Environmental Preservation webinar for the annual ITEC conference. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We are all the attendees. You're not going to be able to see other attendees. You will not be able to unmute yourself, and you're going to be posting all of your questions for our presenters into the chat box. With that, we're going to get started with our first presenter, Libby Billings, with the Elote Cafe and Catering. Libby, the floor is yours.
Hi, so much for having me. My name is Libby. I actually have 3 restaurants in downtown Tulsa. I started my first one, Elote, about 13 years ago after working in the restaurant industry for a long time and just realizing how wasteful the industry itself is. I always kind of joke about the fact that my parents were hippies, but it is 100% true. There are things that are common amongst most households that were not common amongst mine, such as, such as paper towels or Ziploc baggies or things like that. Eating meat, we didn't do those things growing up. And so I think that whenever I opened the restaurant, it was an opportunity for me to bring some of those practices into the commercial world and really be able to make an impact. And sometimes those changes are hard for your employees to accept, and sometimes they get 100% on board, and it's really pleasant to see that and to be able to make that impact on a larger scale than just in my home. So hopefully some of you guys are interested in making that impact as well. So I'll just go through some of the things that I do at my 3 restaurants to help positively impact our environment. So the first thing is kind of a no-brainer for me, and that is just to not use styrofoam. So when Elote opened, we were actually the first restaurant in Tulsa, Oklahoma to use biodegradable to-go boxes. We had to have them special ordered, and they are definitely a little bit more expensive. But what I found is that when you are doing the right thing, a lot of customers appreciate that, and they will continue supporting you because they also they live that lifestyle at home, and they want to support businesses that support them. So we have to-go containers made from corn and sugar beets. We have aluminum, which is recyclable, but we don't have any single-use plastic in the restaurants, but styrofoam was definitely the easiest and first thing that we ditched. So there's that. Single-use plastic is another thing that is incredibly wasteful and just never biodegrades. And so if you look in this picture, this is a picture of a margarita at Elote, and it has a green straw in it. And that was that originally when we started, we didn't want to use plastic straws, and so we found these biodegradable straws that they take a long time to compost, but it's shorter than never, which is how single-use plastic is. But since then, we've actually changed, and now we use exclusively metal straws. So we don't even have the green eco-friendly ones. For to-go drinks, we do have a straw that is made out of hay, so that is an option, but we only give those with to-go orders. Anyone who drinks a beverage inside the restaurant, if they want a straw, it's a metal straw. And we've had like a very little amount of pushback from that. Honestly, sometimes customers will say things to us like, oh, I don't know that I want to put that on my lips because it's been on another customer's lips. And we just, as nicely as possible, say things like, well, we wash it in the same silverware cleaner that we do for your forks. And it's kind of like a light bulb goes off in their head like, oh yeah, I eat off of a fork that someone else has eaten off of too. But it works out really well, and we clean those every day, but it's just a way to limit the trash and the pollutants for our environment. We do have to use plastic gloves. That's required by our health department, but anything else, if we can, instead of using saran wrap, we're using lids. Instead of little plastic containers for to-go items, we're using biodegradable ones. So just making every effort possible to do that. Even with our kids' cups, instead of having little plastic cups, we have these rubber lids that go over our cups. And then we put a metal straw in it, and it's just a reusable thing. So I'm always thinking about ways to reuse things instead of throw away for single use. And the good thing about that is not only does it impact the earth, it's also really good for the financial side of business, because every time that you're throwing away a kid's cup, that costs money. But if you buy 10 little lids for your regular cups that you have in house and metal straws to go with them and use those over and over, it really is cost effective. So that's the next thing. Next up is basically just remembering I wasn't great at this in the beginning of opening Elote. We started with doing things like having free range chicken and organic beef and our compostable containers, even like low flow toilets that had dual flush mode and everything. But I wasn't very good at bragging about that. It just kind of was something that I did in their businesses. And then whenever I about it, people would say, "Oh my gosh, you need to be better at bragging about that." So now I try and have signage up around the restaurants or on the menus talking about what we do, because people do want to support that. And also it gives them an opportunity to talk about it whenever they get back to the office or whenever they're around a dinner table, like, did you know that elote is 100%, single plastic free, or, so just talking about what we do. And so this is a like chalkboard at elote. You order at lunchtime, you kind of wait in line and order the register. And so this is right there for anybody who is standing in line. You can read this and just talk about how, what we do in reducing waste and how that could, affects the environment. We used to have one that about shopping local and the economic impact of shopping local, as well as the environmental impact. And it really seems to just resonate with people to be able to read about this, spend a little bit of time and learn a little bit about, how they can feel not only good from the food that we're serving, but also from its impact on the environment. So definitely, if you're going to make these changes, don't to talk about them, because people do want to know that. So next one is photograph of just our buster closet. So typically in a restaurant, you just scrape all of your food debris into one big giant container. And you'll see on the left-hand side of this picture, there's a gray rectangle trash can. And that essentially has, all you can see in that is gloves and liners for chips, because those are the only two things that go into the landfill that come from our restaurant. Everything else is separate. So we have recyclables there, and we have a compost bucket. So our paper napkins can be composted, any food can be composted, etc. And then the one in the center is just to separate out beverages. But it takes a little bit more time to scrape things into different containers, but it does reduce the cost of having your dumpster emptied, as well as, like I said, just doing what's right environment. So we only have this one earth, so we want to make sure we're polluting it as little as possible. So in Tulsa, we have an organization called Full Sun Composting. Natalie is amazing, and she actually tracks how much we compost. So 30,000 pounds of food waste have been diverted since 2018 from my 3 restaurants, and that is the equivalent of 1 car off the road, which is pretty great. So it certainly appreciate very much that she gives us that statistics and that we're able to share them with people. The good thing is she takes our compost from the restaurant, and in her commercial composting facility turns it into compost that you can purchase locally and use to grow veggies. So sometimes I'll buy her stuff from God's Green Barn, and it always makes me happy to think that, like, what was once a scraps of a veggie is now helping me grow tomatoes in my garden or something like that. So pretty awesome to see the cycle complete, as opposed to what would happen if we put our trash straight in a landfill. So
Libby,
yes,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think you're on slide 6, but it's just showing 4.
Oh, weird.
So it's like it's stuck.
Okay.
Now we're on 5. It's showing separating our trash, recycling, and compostables. So that's what's showing.
Okay, there might just be a lag. I'm sorry.
Okay. That's okay.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, well, hopefully everybody gets to see the slides at some point. I didn't mention this before, but I've been on a road trip to Yellowstone National Park and back, and I'm over on the side of the road in Colorado and Idaho Springs. So my apologies. We thought we had some decent bars, but I see now it's cloudy here, so we're doing the best we can. But so the next slide you guys hopefully will be able to see at some point is about recycling. And so just that we recycle with American Waste, which is a local company in Tulsa that takes really great care of us and makes recycling really, really easy. I really like working with Amanda at American Waste. And if anybody's interested in her contact, I'll certainly share that with you. It's amanda@awcok.com. Really great. But the thing I love about them is that there's no separating of anything. You put everything together. So cardboard, glass, plastic, aluminum, it all goes into one container and they take it all away. Because we use so little trash that goes into a landfill, it actually has saved us money by recycling, because they make a little bit of money off of our recycling. Obviously, the goal is for them to turn it into something else. So it's actually less expensive to get recycling than it is to get trash. So because we've diverted it and we're willing to separate that, it's cost effective for us as well. The next slide, if you can see it, is a picture of my general manager, Ashton. He works at Elote, and Ashton's really awesome because he really buys into what we believe in and has made a lot of positive changes at Elote. And sometimes it's hard to get, my cooks to put the lettuce scraps into the compost bin instead of trash, because it's just an extra step. But having an employee who really believes in what you're doing really helps with that a lot, because like I said, I have 2 restaurants that I'm going to manage, so I can't be at all of them at all the time to just make sure like that things are getting done, but make sure that you have some, a lead for your department or that area who also believes in what you're doing is so much more effective than just kind of telling people, hey, this is a change we're going to start making. I expect you guys to do this. But if somebody really believes in it, and then they can come in, so Ashton will come in and notice that somebody's put corn husks in the trash and be like, hey guys, don't forget, we're trying to do the right thing here. Please get these into the compost. And it's just really, it's benefited a lot having somebody who believes in what we're doing there. So okay, this next slide is it's actually a picture of this huge thing called a water monster, which is like basically a 50-gallon water container that you would see sometimes like a race or a run. And I connected with our chamber because they were using these for like races or Tulsa Tough, those kinds of. And I realized we put on a festival every year, brings between 2,000 and 3,000 people out to it. I did not want to sell bottled water. I didn't want to do the single-use plastic. So I borrowed all these water monsters from our chamber and essentially filled them with water, and then put a little bit of information on the front of it. I mean, it's just handwritten it, but it just, we are, bottled water free, and that you can fill up your water. Basically, we'd sell them, cups, reusable cups, or just give them a biodegradable cup if they wanted. But, a lot of times people will say like, they'll take the easier route, or they'll just be like, that can't be done. And especially in Oklahoma, opening a restaurant, 13, 14 years ago, trying to be environmentally friendly, I had a lot of people that just did not believe that was gonna work out. But honestly, I've kind of become the leader in environmental or sustainability in restaurants. And it's really just because I didn't listen to the people that said like, no one cares in Oklahoma about that, because people really do. And I can say 100% throughout the pandemic that is a big part of why I think I was successful through that, was just because my customers really wanted to support what we were doing, because they said, oh, Elote has got to be around when this is over. I'm like, thank you so much. But, they were ordering to-go food, and they didn't want to be throwing styrofoam boxes away all the time. And so they could feel good about getting food to go from us. So if people kind of give you change is hard, I'll say that change is hard. And if you want to implement these changes, you're going to have people that'll tell you that it's not a good idea. And specifically whenever they think that it's going to cost more money. So, if I'm taking away bottled water, I'm taking away a source of revenue for the restaurant, for the festival. So if I can make sure that I'm presenting it, if I was presenting it to a boss in a matter of like, but we will gain customers because they'll appreciate that we're plastic free, or we can charge for our reusable cups, $1. And that is better, because then our guests are reusing these cups and, seeing our branding every day, as opposed to buying, a Dasani or Aquafina water bottle or whatever. So just don't stick to your guns, and don't listen to the naysayers when it comes to trying to implement these positive changes. This last one, this slide I just love. It's I just saw this on the side of the road one day and had to take a picture. It was just a kid who had like made a little sign and a picture of the earth, and it says, I love you, please recycle, please remember to recycle. And I just think about with this one, just how much our children are learning differently than we are, and how much our actions can affect theirs. So if we don't recycle at home, or we don't teach them these things, then they'll grow up in an environment where they don't want to do that. But they are learning at school the importance of doing these things. And so if we can support that, I don't know how many times people have said, oh, I love your restaurant because my daughter wants to be a vegetarian and I don't know how to cook for her. It's like, decision for the earth, for the animals, for her body. And I just love that. And so supporting that and spreading that kindness, I think is really cool. And my last slide is just a shameless plug for the restaurants. If you are in Tulsa or have any interest in coming in, please come check them out. Elote, the Vault, and Roppongi. I have a little slide here that shows you the things that we do, like composting, recycling, single-use plastic-free, offering free-range chicken, local eggs, supporting local business and farmers and breweries. And then my cell phone number is on here. It is 918-814-5756. Text is definitely the best way to get a hold of me if you have questions or just need contacts or anything like that. I would love to help make Tulsa a more, or just Oklahoma, the whole world, whatever I can do to share information on how I've been able to be successful with implementing positive changes for the environment. I'd love to share that with others. So that's it.
Thank you so much, Libby. I know you got to jump off. So if anyone has any questions for her, please put that in the chat box or email Karen or myself, and we will get those over to Libby. Libby, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it, and be safe on your trip.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry about our technical difficulties.
That's okay.
All right. Take care.
See you later.
Bye.
Our next presenter is Sarah Cook with the Wildlife Habitat Council. Sarah, I have given you presenter privileges and you are able to share your screen.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you, first of all, for having Wildlife Habitat Council and me in particular. I was fortunate enough to be able to talk to Chelsea and connect with this group during your event. I'm going to take a little different tack. It's a bit broader perspective, but we'll bring it down to the scalable size, that Libby was just talking about with respect to local impacts and local abilities. And really what I want to talk about is how we can conduct conservation at kind of an individual or small group scale, and then use those, connect those activities to generate a more sustainable, conservation-minded local community environment. And so what I think we need to do first, though, is kind of introduce you to Wildlife Habitat Council. It's an organization, we're based in Washington, D.C., but we're global. And we're a nonprofit that focuses on a single belief that every act of conservation matters. And we distinctly work with businesses, so corporate and private interests, because many conservation and biodiversity facing programs are focused on the public sector. Very few are focused distinctly on the private sector. And what that means is largely there's a huge opportunity in terms of the capacity of land around these private land holdings being available for conservation. And so we've got a model that's been in place for over 30 years where we connect our members, who are corporations, with our partner and academic network, which includes agency folks from various state and federal agencies, international supply chain organizations, academia, universities, municipalities, and the list goes on. And we bring these interests together and we help them focus on how, rather than talking about how we're different and how one is affecting the environment and the other isn't or whatever, we bring them together for collaboration, and we focus these activities with corporations on sustainability, employee engagement, and community awareness. And then we also, as part of that process, have developed pretty much the only biodiverse, third-party credible biodiversity standard that's available. And it's a certification process that's much smaller and less complex than like an ISO environmental management system kind of, or even Energy Star, but it's similar in the concept that you have this standard that you have to follow. And we use our model to engage corporations so that we can do broader good in this, along that that concept of every act of conservation matters. So just to put some context around where I'll be speaking from, it's from how we've adapted sound activities and engagement recommendations for the corporate sector. But interestingly enough, that can actually be applied to communities and even individuals. And I think the pandemic has shown us that. That said, one of the things that we do is we directly design, implement, and help organizations monitor activities around biodiversity enhancement and conservation programs. And we can do that at scale, which we'll talk about in a second. But we don't just do it with corporations, we also do it with other community groups. So I have a counterpart who is in Northwest Indiana, and his primary job is to execute various grant funding that he's obtained through community partnership and collaboration and building networks around, say, tree plantings or STEM education, et cetera. And so we're in the fortunate position that we can put our toes in both waters. We can get funding and we can also work with corporations. And what we've been able to do with that experience is we have provided some access to some water conservation funding opportunities directly on our website. You'll see a lot of live links in this presentation. I will put them in the chat in the third part of the experience, so folks don't have to go to the slides to get it. But my point is that we've taken our experience and we've shaped it into various resources that are accessible for free, whether you're a member of WHCs or not. And in that process, we give organizations a platform to discuss their efforts. And one of the case studies I want to share with you, and the photo on the left is actually a midstream pipeline project. That Crestwood Midstream has a project up in Fort Berthold in North Dakota, and they took a really interesting approach to their restoration remediation activities. So BLM has required a 3 to 5 year success rate on their restoration activities. So that's what they put in place after they do the construction on the natural gas pipeline and delivery mechanisms. And in doing so, Crestwood said, you know what, we that's not good enough. We want to have a 1 to 2 year success rate. And so what they did is they partnered with the 3 tribes that they engage with as part of this collaboration. And then they also connected with North Dakota NRCS, and they developed a specified seed blend that not only exceeded their obligations to their reclamation requirements under their permits, but they were actually able to propagate native seed blends that were locally relevant, support things like sage grouse, outcompete things like Canadian thistle, and also have cultural significance with the 3 tribes that helped inform their seed selection. So my point there is that whatever seat you're sitting in, whether you're on the community seat or you're the corporate seat, using kind of our methodology of going native, going for local value, and also kind of finding what works at the ground level where you're living, working, and in our members' cases, producing goods and services, you can still have an informed and positive kind of restoration activity, conservation activity, or manage your land for biodiversity in a community-minded way. So there's a really good case study there, and we actually have it up on our website as well. And then we provide for again, accessible for anyone, conservation and education resources for communities and families. I'll go into more detail about that, but we publish a number of things. We have a series of live and on-demand webinars that are free. They are funded, so you just have to click and download. We provide white papers for those that are looking for specific case studies in how to conduct conservation at the community level. We build toolkits and we provide guidance materials. So the pandemic hit everyone, but it hit everyone in different ways. And so what we were able to do was take some simple ideas, some of which I've used in this presentation, to make conservation accessible, even when access to resources, large tracts of land, And being able to engage with other members of society was limited, right? So we have a whole number of resources available on our website. And then as part of this process, we help guide people in scalable and tangible projects. So, Libby was talking about how she started rethinking her business and her platform for conducting, kind of making sound environmental and sustainability decisions. And it was individual decisions about materials that they were using, that when you aggregate those examples, you now have a business model across her businesses that makes a huge impact. She shared some information with us. So we have a similar thought process with conservation. It can happen at scale. It can be anything from selecting native pollinators outside of, as you can see this in the top right, an office building. It looks a little wild, but that's actually a pollinator garden that when blooming provides foraging and nectar for an essential set of species in our country. There's retention ponds. I mean, this looks like just a wet area outside of a production facility, one of our members' locations, and they manage it so that it actually performs a function to trap sediment after rain events. We've got bee care. This is a really cool example of where a group in Brazil created insect hotels and actually had a contest with their employees to engage their employees. And then we have another scale of activities, which is in Louisiana, we had students coming to an outdoor classroom. And so the scale of that activity is much larger because you're talking about individual students that are impacted, teachers and volunteers. But all of these things come together around something simple, just the idea of providing conservation value in the habitat. And so that's how we help people make those decisions on what can I do? What can I do in my backyard? What can I do in my neighborhood? What can I do in the front entryway of my business? A really big one and an easy one that anyone can support is pollinator conservation. It has been pretty prevalent for the last few years. I mean, starting with the Obama administration, making a formal commitment to increase pollinators across the country, in particular the monarch butterfly, but it doesn't stop with just the beautiful species. So pollinators, and that includes not only stinging bees and things that we're familiar with and beautiful butterflies, but it includes birds. In some places, it includes mammals like tiny field mice and so on. Other places, it's a specific kind of fly like the cocoa plant, which chocolate is a foodstuff that we use globally, is pollinated by a single species. So if that species were disrupted, bye-bye Hershey chocolate bar. So essentially pollinators, I mean, they support 150 varieties of food crops in the US and over 30% of the food production globally. And some of the key foods that, most of us recognize and are actually here and available to us because of the work of pollinators. And the primary cause for the decline of pollinators is habitat loss and fragmentation. It's a common issue with species of all varieties, but pollinators are especially sensitive. And, there's ways that you can help, whether you're just looking at doing that at home, or you want to do that at your school, or you want to do that with a conservation group or as a member of an agency. And so one of the most simple things you can do is look, learn, and listen about pollinators. So what we try to encourage, and we have materials available for this, is learning about what pollinators mean and listening around to the environment around you, and then also kind of taking the time to explore the environment around you. And one way to do that is to create a pollinator-friendly garden at home. And this is something that's simple to do. And most native nurseries that you have access to, and many now sell online, will help you find and select the right plants for your soil type, the right plants for your light conditions, and the right plants for the kind of species you want to bring to your yard, to your community park, again, to your office building. and it can be done at scale. Again, you can go with a little container garden that you've done. We have member companies that do that too. An example would be this pollinator meadow that's in the bottom right corner. But that's what I mean by scale. And pollinators are an easy one to rally around because the projects are very inexpensive. The materials are accessible. And if you can see in the center photo, another fun project is just taking a block of wood and drilling holes in it and leaving it outside. And believe it or not, you will have all kinds of creatures utilizing that. And these are all kind of tangible activities that you can do that when scaled up can have a huge impact. Another set of common activities that we recommend are habitat activities. And these are kind of like projects that are oftentimes in our communities already. They're in and around the places that we're going to and from on a daily basis. They're in our backyards. And these projects encourage life cycle need support for various species. Could just be one species. It could be a group of species. And then also engaging the youth and the broader community. And a couple of the easy things that you can do to support habitats are as simple as planting a tree or a shrub or a plant of any kind. With the focus, in the news on climate change, and in particular, the role carbon plays in greenhouse gases and global temperature changes, tree planting has become a lever by which communities can impact a larger effort to support mitigation of greenhouse gases, because trees, once planted and once helped to grow, can sequester carbon dioxide for their lifetime. And what we are really focusing on in different areas is doing this at the community level. We've obtained a couple of grants and we're working in a number of cities to provide education, materials, and even implementation resources. And as I mentioned, I have some counterparts in the Midwest that this weekend, in fact, are doing a large tree planting in Detroit. So we can help with that. We can point you in the right direction, and we encourage it. There's also a number of resources, and for those of you who are involved with the government at all, may be familiar with Davey Tree Institute's iTree, and it's a wonderful online tool. It's a bit complex at first, but you can plug and play however many trees you're planting, and actually it will calculate the impact that tree has on your environment and on your community. So that's a really neat project that starts with digging a hole and putting a tree in the ground and watering it. But there are so many other connections that you can make, not only getting people together, being outside. You can take a teaching moment. There are a number of formal lesson plans that revolve around the benefits of a tree, how a tree functions, and even from a wellness and health perspective, the value a tree brings to human health and wellness. So that is a really good project that's tangible, it's accessible, generally inexpensive, and can be done at scale. Similar vein, you can build brush piles. So I happen to live on a wooded lot, and nature takes care of that for me. But many of the folks that we work with are working in community parks, so they don't want to have piles of brush. But we can help give you ideas of designing and building those in a way that provides cover for small mammals. As those piles decay, you provide insect food and nutrients for the soil and so on. But they're inexpensive. You can collect found materials and create these little tiny pockets of habitat that provide shelter for a number of species. In that same vein, you can install a bird or a bat box. We have a number of designs. There are a number of websites. Most of the state departments of natural resources, universities, and extension offices have good designs. And these bird boxes or bat boxes, again, provide shelter for a number of species. And the photo on the bottom left is a series of bird boxes and bat boxes I did with 2 Girl Scout troops when I lived in Arizona. It was before I worked with WHC, but this was for the troops to engage in outdoor education and environmental awareness. And our staff actually installed these around the property, and then the troops would come and check them. And we never had any bats in the bat box. We just had lizards, but nonetheless, it still provided shelter. So it was a really neat experience. And it was simple, and these materials can be made by hand or can be purchased for, I think Home Depot even sells some of these bird boxes. Another really good project is, if you're looking for something larger in impact, is do a trash cleanup. This is so simple. And there are a number of organizations like Adopt a Highway that do that. Now, this one is caveated. You've got to think about safety. You have to think about exposure. I mean, we don't want kids picking up glass, for example, but there are ways to do it safely. And there are a number of organizations that organize these events and have the materials for you, and you can track your progress. So we've done cleanups with a group out of the Midwest called Living Lands for Waters. And it's a group that goes up and down the Ohio River on barges and hosts cleanups along the river. And then they will weigh the trash that you pick up, and you get to say, oh, we recycled 2,000 pounds of trash, and we had 15 tires that we dug out of the riverbed, and so on. And it's a really simple way to have an impact on your community. And again, very inexpensive to do. And there are many organizations at the community level that are engaged in this activity already, and we can help connect you to those. Environmental scavenger hunts can be another great way to engage kids, family members. During the pandemic, we have 8-year-old twins. We had done a kids webinar series about a scavenger hunt. And after we watched the 30-minute segment, we went out in our yard and did one. You can do this in your backyard. And there are a number of handy cell phone apps and other easy tools that can be accessed to help you identify what you find. And it's a lot of fun. And it gets kids outside and engaging with their environment. And I won't beat a dead horse by going through planting a pollinator garden again, but the key there is make sure the species are native. That way you're attracting more diversity through your habitat, and also you're not supporting a noxious or alien plant species in your own garden. But moving on, some of the things that we like to talk about is collaboration. So partners are really important. And I think we all know this, but it's not easy to find partners. But when you can, and when you do, you can leverage shared or limited resources. That never was more apparent to me than during the pandemic. Access and resources were limited. And by collecting partners and or reaching out to like-minded organizations, other teachers, etc., you can leverage those resources. And connecting with someone like WHC, a lot of those are available for free, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. So it's also a time saver. Kind of similar to what Libby's example was, creating kind of this impact at a small scale and then expanding that impact over time can only be scaled up through partnerships. So, for every 2 schools that get together, you've elevated or amplified the impact that you can have, and the number of minds that you might be changing on how to take care of and care for their environment in a sustainable way. It's not a one-time thing, right? So, being able to connect with partners who are knowledgeable, leverage this expertise, and create kind of this scalable event allows you to bring more value to those activities and outcomes. And then, working with other groups can also help share your story. I mean, it's a social media world. We can't avoid it anymore. And furthermore, it can be a tool for sharing what you're doing, how you're doing it. And again, WHC offers a number of examples on our website through our blogs, through our index of projects, and through spotlights on projects that folks are putting in place. And then, of course, we've got alignment opportunities. Most municipal and local groups and regional kind of distributions and states and counties all have commitments that they have made at scale to various conservation priorities like wetlands, watersheds. Maybe it's removing invasive species. Maybe it's managing deer. There's a number of ways. Maybe it's putting the A in STEM education and turning it into STEAM. Whatever that may be, you can leverage partners, you can leverage conservation and biodiversity focused programming to bring people together to support that. And again, WHC is more than happy to connect you with our network and help provide some guidance on this. We have a number of resources on effectively building partnerships. And then of course, again, by reviewing some of the things that we have in our live and on-demand webinars, you'll also get firsthand look at some of the experts that we consider partners in conservation and biodiversity. And then that kind of leads me into one of my final thoughts here, and that is, I want to encourage you all to visit our website. We have a number of things that are ready-made, and they're there to provide guidance, to get you thinking, and in some cases to give you the resource you need, the checklist, the steps to success. And as I mentioned earlier, we have webinars, we have a number of guidances. You can see in the middle frame here, Conservation in Time of Crisis was actually a toolkit that we designed and published in response to the pandemic and people needing a place to go. And nature became kind of our mechanism for engaging folks. We also have a number of events every year, including our annual conservation conference. And we also have periodic events that are live and on demand throughout the year. We have one coming up in October, I think it is. It's a one-day workshop, series of workshops. And then of course we have other kind of media focused activities like blogs, an index of projects, and so on. So I realize I kind of went through that fast. I hope I gave you some perspective and context, but I did want to share that, most of the model that we use and most of the folks that we work with, whether it's a community group or a corporation, we start with simple questions about what's important to you, what are you looking to engage in, and at what scale. And then outside of the suggestions that I made in this series of slides, we take the answers that they share with us for that, and then we find the right kind of projects that matches that need, that resource base, and then ultimately, help the process move forward. So I'm happy to take any questions. I'm also going to put, as I mentioned earlier, some information in the chat where you can go and visit these resources yourself. And I, again, appreciate the opportunity to speak with you about how you can use conservation to connect with communities and make an impact in the environment.
Thank you so much, Sarah. You may check your chat box and see if anyone sent you any chats directly to you.
Okay, will do.
And then are you able to share your presentation if people request it?
Of course I am. I'm going to send you.
If you want to send that to me.
Sure.
And then if people ask, then I can send that out to people.
Absolutely. And again, pay attention to the chat box for those of you in attendance, and I'll put a few links in there for you and my contact information.
Awesome. Well, unfortunately, our other presenter, Clayton, was not able to join us today. So hopefully we can have him present in another webinar someday. But with that, this session is over, and our next one will be starting at 3 o'clock for innovative technology. A big thank you to Libby and Sarah for joining us today. We really enjoyed your presentations. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
And I will leave the meeting up for just a little bit so that people can grab the information that Sarah just sent to everyone.